and warriors, we drinking it down. Raise your voices and stir up this town. We're the champions of craft beer sport. Tall Can Audio, we hold down the fort.
So we are back at it again with another edition of the Tall Can Audio podcast. We stopped talking about the numbers a while ago. If you're curious, we are up to 1,647 episodes of the Tall Can Audio podcast. Matt Robinson along with you here today, and I'm not sure, there was a part of me throughout the afternoon sort of taking some notes. I'm reading some things. I'm looking at some things we didn't get to on the Monday show. And I'm sort of looking at the idea of putting out another a solo show for Tuesday morning. And I'm looking at that Monday morning show going, that thing crossed 2 hours. Which is fine. We're just sitting here having a beer talking sports like we would be anyway. But it is a lot of Matt. It is a lot of Rob. It is a lot of TCA. And so it's possible that the last thing the world needed was a second episode quite so soon, or another episode quite so soon. But here we are, and nobody twisted your arm. You could have rolled your eyes, scrolled past it. I might have. We're on social media at Tall Can Audio. Would love to hear from you there. And I've been pushing this a little harder lately because it seems to be becoming more and more important on some of these apps. If you haven't left us a rating or a review inside your podcast app, it does help out quite a bit. We'd love to hear what you think. It's an easy, cheap, it's actually pretty free way to support the podcast. So if you haven't done that yet, we'd love it if you'd leave us a review in whatever app you're hearing us right now. But there was just a couple of things that we didn't get to, and some things that weren't addressed properly, especially around the World Junior, which I mentioned on the show. Like, it's hard to, well, let's do this thing first. So that's an odd-sounding open, and it's because the can's only 5/8 full. If you recall, some of you will, from before the holiday season, I had something from Whippersnapper, which I'm having again. It is their Dark Czech Lager, or Czech Dark Lager. And I had noted, some people may have said I complained, I had noted that the can wasn't full. And it felt light. It felt lighter than it normally would. And then once I cracked it open, my fears were confirmed. And I stuck a finger on in there just to see how far down it was. And I said it was about a 5/8 full can. And not surprisingly, I took some shit from our buddy Ian over at Whippersnapper via text message a couple days later whenever he heard the episode. He's like, this is the last fucking time I bring you a sampler, which is pretty fair. And I did say in the moment, he had brought plenty of other beer, as he always does. We had been there, or would go there. I can't remember exactly what day this observation had happened on the podcast, but we went over to Whippersnapper on the last Saturday before Christmas, had some pizza there, had some beers there, and then Ian was cool enough to hook us up with a flight to try a couple different things. But I was busting on him a little bit, and just noted that he pointed out, as I suspected in the moment, but didn't know for sure in the moment, it was just meant to be a sampler. The cans were ready, and the label was on them, but he hadn't actually canned the beer yet. And so he just fired some beer into a couple of them, sealed it up, and brought them over, just so we'd be able to try it. But because it had already been labeled and had a name and the art was done and everything, it was a little confusing to me because when Ian had been here, there had been more than one or two beers. And the memory gets a little fuzzy. And I don't remember if he had explained that in the moment, but, that beer was just coming out. It wasn't actually canned yet. So he had just, like I said, thrown some into a couple of cans, brought it over. And it had slipped my mind by the time I got to it on the podcast later, I guess, that this was a sampler of some kind. So he was actually doing me a favor, and I busted his balls over it. So good job, Matt. It's very tasty, as it was the first time. Wish there was a full can, but that's a whole other thing. Look, this happens now and then on the podcast. We have a it's one of the dangers of not being live. And there are a few of you who are starting to push this idea, go live on YouTube, go live on whatever. There's cameras involved in that. I'm fighting that idea. I'm going to lose that fight in 2026, I think. This may have to become a video show as well as the audio version. That's just the way this is all going. But when you aren't live, and we record on Sunday afternoons to release on Monday morning, that's the way the TCA clock works. That's how we start the week. And every now and then, there's a Blue Jay playoff game, or there's a World Junior semifinal, or there's a Super Bowl or a Grey Cup that takes place after we are done recording, but before the show is going to get to you. And it puts us in a tough spot because there is this feeling that, well, we should at least talk a little bit about it. And Head Canada won their semifinal on Sunday night, which they did not. Most of the observations would carry. We wouldn't have been able to obviously comment on the semifinal, but here's what we had seen in the round robin. Here's what we'd seen in the quarterfinal. And here's what we think might take place in the gold medal game. But they lost. And so all of the observations you just made are completely irrelevant because now everyone is talking about the loss. And so that is why I pushed that topic to the end of the show, like I often do with UFC, like I often do with some wrestling stuff. Basically, when I think we're going to lose people, I don't want to, you don't lead off the show that way. That's a bad way to program your podcast. And so Head Canada won, and people wanted to keep hearing about Team Canada. They would stick around for that last bit of the show where we're talking World Juniors, and maybe it would still fit. And those who thought it was out of date could check out without having missed the rest of the show. No problem. But when you lose, nobody wants to listen to your outdated observations from before the semifinal. And in this case, they lost on a Sunday. Bronze medal game is Monday. Rob's not back in again until Sunday. He's going to want to talk about it. It would have been a week old at that point. So at some point, you've got to put this in here, right? My man's got to have a chance to vent his opinions. But that's over now, and we've seen the semifinal, and I got some things to say. Because I can come in here whenever the hell I want. Well, he can too, but it's less convenient. And he doesn't know what buttons to press. The World Juniors more and more seems to bring out the worst in us. And I used to think it was just tied to social media. And that is a big part of it. Like, we can all throw out that blanket statement. I would say all, but there are some people who apparently disagree. If your first reaction to watching some teenagers lose a hockey game is to seek out their Instagram or their family's Instagram, or, I don't know, do you comment on TikToks? I don't have TikTok. I don't know what the kids are doing now. And rip these kids in their comments and blow up their social medias, you're kind of a douche. And you should probably seek some help. But short of that, you and me can sit there on Twitter and argue about what the problem was, and it was Dale Hunter this, and it was Zane Parekh that, and it was bad team selection, and it whatever. But we do sort of lose our minds a little. And I'll leave it up to you. You're going to hear a couple of my thoughts here on whether I'm being reasonable or being stupid. I know where I'd put my money. And some of you would have seen me interacting with some people and tweeting on Sunday night after the game as well. But let's start here. This was no fluke. The Czechs have now beaten us and eliminated us 3 years in a row. When it happens once, even maybe when it happens twice, you go, well, we were missing this guy and they had this one play there go their way and, a bad power play here or there. No. When you lose 3 in a row in elimination games to the same team, that's not a fluke. They are full value for beating your ass. And that especially stands true at an event like this. Like when the Leafs just kept having their necks wrung by the Boston Bruins or the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Florida Panthers. They get their necks wrung a lot. You can go, well, it's their great core against your bad core. And of course, it's going to keep playing out the same way. The makeup of these teams doesn't change enough to allow for a different result. In 3 years at the World Juniors, you turn over a full roster. You don't have the same guys year after year. You don't have the same coaches year after year. You don't have the same schemes year after year. You don't have the same goaltenders year after year. And they keep kicking your ass. So this is not simply about Canada has picked a bad team for 3 years in a row. Or Canada has been mismanaged or made, bad plays or had bad luck for 3 years in a row. When you are routinely getting your ass beat by the same team, that's not a fluke. And so we can have reasonable conversations about, the Ben Danford, the Aitchison pairing having a very bad night. We can talk about why Michael Misa wasn't more productive at this tournament. We can have reasonable conversations about why things turned out the way they did. But any idea that you were just unlucky again, or, your guys didn't want it enough. Do you really think we had 3 straight years of Canadian teams not trying hard enough? And that's why the Czechs keep beating us? No. There is something going on that they have got figured out. And we can talk about it with Latvia as well, quite frankly. They announced what the likely pools are going to look like. I'm recording this in between the bronze medal game and the gold medal game on Monday at the World Juniors. So we don't know the final, which of Czechia and which of Sweden will end up in each pool. But Canada's in a pool with Latvia. And I don't love that. But they're not afraid of you anymore either. One of the things that used to happen at this tournament, and you can frame it however you want. I see a lot of people going, we're not bringing enough big, rugged WHL defensemen anymore who are going to Dion Phaneuf somebody through the boards. I don't think that's our biggest problem, but we can have that conversation. The way we're building these teams. But you used to be able to start this tournament already with a lead against some of these teams. Not against the Russians, not against the Americans, the Swedes, depending on the year, Finns, whatever. But everybody else came into the tournament going, we have no shot against Canada. They went into the opening face-off going, we have no shot against Team Canada. You go out, you throw a couple big hits early, you put one on the board, and you'd never say they give up or fold the tent, because upsets still happen now and then. But you have already confirmed what they knew in their hearts to be true, that they had no chance, and that was half the battle. You had won that part of the battle before the game started. They didn't think they could win. You helped plant that seed for them a little later, and off you go. 6-1, on to the next one. Well, the world of hockey has caught up a little bit. We can talk about whether or not Canada is doing what it should to be trying to keep that gap or to stop how fast that gap is shrinking, or whether Canada is making mistakes that is allowing them to sink back while the rest of the world is catching up. All of those are reasonable conversations, but there are teams out there who are not afraid of you anymore. And that has nothing to do with whether you have a 6'6" WHL defenseman on your back end, somebody who's going to put your head through the end boards on your fourth line. They're not afraid of you. The Czechs came at Canada in that semifinal. They were the more physical team. Once the game turned into a bit of a track meet and you're scoring goals back and forth and it's getting a little sloppy, the Czechs aren't afraid of you physically. The Czechs are skating every bit as fast as you are. And the Czechs are finding out that they can score. And this is going to be a battle all the way through. They're not afraid. That thing that we used to do where you score 3 or 4 minutes in, they hang their heads and go, well, this is always the way it was supposed to play out. Those days are gone. And I mentioned Latvia. Those days are gone with Latvia. Latvia is an inferior hockey nation right now with their development. Hell, just the number of players registered in the sport across their country. But they have found something, whether it be the way our systems work that they've latched onto, or just they've watched other Latvian teams hang with Canada, that they walk in going, we're probably not going to beat them. We might. But we're not afraid of them. So that is the thing that's gone. As the world has caught up, and don't get it twisted, because when I'm saying they're not afraid of you anymore, I'm not suggesting you go back to having these monsters on your blue line to scare them again. They just know now they can play with you. They're not scared anymore. And that's what I saw against the Czechs in both games, in the round robin and in the semifinal. In the Latvia game, in the Finland game, both in the round robin and the bronze medal game. The biggest shift for me that has occurred here is a mindset shift. And those countries are full value for A, having caught up enough to make the skill differential not quite as big as it used to be, but more importantly, the mindset that says, well, let's see what happens. They got a bunch of first rounders over there, but if we play as a team, which the Czechs did, let's see. We might still get rolled 6-1 here, but they no longer walk into the rink believing that's what is going to happen. There are legitimate questions about how this team was put together. I'm surprised at the way we're zeroing in on certain things. Like Ben Danford is supposed to be a shutdown guy. Yeah, I don't know why you're dressing 8 defensemen, and it ends up fucking you in that semifinal because somebody gets hurt, and now your lines are in chaos. And I didn't think Dale Hunter adjusted to that particularly well. He seemed frazzled there for a little while trying to get that figured out. But that's why teams in a tournament like this go 7-13, not 12-8. That was weird. I don't know why he did it. But Ben Danford, who I want to cheer for, former Oshawa General, potentially future Leaf. I don't know. We'll probably trade him for a declining third-line right winger in a desperate attempt to make the play. Let's not do that. I want to like the guy. Had a bad game at the worst possible time. I kind of get why you would be critical there. Your job here is to defend, is to break up cycle plays, is to penalty kill. That's what you do here. And yet, people are pointing at Zane Parek's defense. Well, Zane Parekh in the bronze medal game just set a new single tournament record for points by a Canadian defenseman. If you thought he was going to do anything but play exactly the way he played, that's on you. He was an offensive star. And he did his job. I just said, now has more points in one World Junior than any defenseman before him, Canadian defenseman before him. That's a great performance. He's not a shutdown guy. He's not a penalty kill guy. He does struggle in his own end. We knew that going in. And they decided they were fine with that. And that the trade-offs would be worth it. And the trade-offs were worth it. If you want to grab the low-hanging fruit after a bad tournament and say it's because Zane Parekh doesn't defend well enough, it's a ridiculous argument. They brought him for a reason, to do a certain job. He did that job. Was it always pretty? It was not. But that's how it goes sometimes. So I'm surprised why, I don't know why he's taking strays right now. And he's not even taking strays. They're aimed right at him. It's ridiculous. Now, this is a conversation we've had before. Would you take Evan Bouchard to the Olympics? That's what it looks like. He's going to help crush the power play for you. He's going to help you break things out on on the breakout. That's what you do when you break things out. You do that on the breakout. Sweet passes, get the offense going, and he's going to blow it a few times in some big moments defensively. And that's why they decided in that moment not to bring him, because they already have a Cale Makar. This World Junior team did not already have a Cale Makar. Zane Parekh was going to be their Cale Makar. The Gavin McKenna of all of this is interesting to me. I don't know, and I mean it when I say it's interesting. I don't yet have a strong opinion on this kid. I thought the World Junior might help me get there, and yet I'm no closer to having formed a strong opinion than I was before the tournament started. He dominated Junior last year. Okay. This new opportunity opens up for Canadian juniors to go play in the United States and the NCAA. He decides he's going to do that. He goes to Penn State, which is an unproven hockey program. So already it was unique. He's not 18 yet, and he's playing against 22-year-old defensemen. That's unique, and his numbers drop. Well, is he being bodied by bigger, stronger players? Is he struggling to adjust being in another country? Is the NCAA game different? His points sort of suggest he's struggling. And his defensive game at that. So you go, okay, I don't have enough context yet. We haven't seen enough of these kids do this yet for long enough yet for me to know what that means. If you had left him in the WHL this year, does he got 100 points by the time he leaves for the World Junior Camp? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe he's just not that kid. I don't know. So I go, okay, let's see what he looks like at the World Juniors, where he's still not yet drafted. This is not a tournament that 17-year-olds dominate, but some very special 17-year-olds have dominated in their draft year. The most recent, of course, being Connor Bedard. So let's see what he looks like at the tournament. And I would say he looked fine at the tournament. He didn't dominate it like a Bedard did, but that's okay. Not everybody's going to. He wasn't invisible like some 17-year-olds who come back and they're just not there yet. They're just not ready. He was fine. They played him on the second line. I thought that line, like most of you did, was probably Canada's best with Michael Hage and Brady Martin before he got hurt. But I thought Brady Martin was the driver on that, and certainly Hage. I didn't think Gavin McKenna was the one driving that line, but he was not out of place. He looked fine. He put up a bunch of points, but we're leaving this tournament with me going, okay, so in your old age group, or in your own age group, not playing against men, 22-year-old NCAA defensemen, did you tear it up? Well, you were good. You weren't great. You weren't terrible. And so I don't feel like I got any further context on him still. Like there's people saying leaving this tournament, his chances of going number one overall are now gone. I don't think that's true. I think it depends who finishes in that spot. I think it depends, does he adjust a little bit better in the second half of the NCAA season? What's he look like there? I don't think it's a slam dunk he's going number one, but I don't think he's flushed that opportunity. But with everything that's gone on with that kid this year, leaving junior for NCAA in an unproven program, playing against older kids, like he is the first of this group of Bedards or Celebrinis or McDavids or McKinnons or whatever, who are supposed to be the slam dunk number one overall pick. None of them ever jumped from junior to college in their draft year like this kid did. So that throws a wrinkle into it. And then he comes back to this tournament and he's good, but he's not great. And that throws a wrinkle into it. When I said to lead off this segment, I find the Gavin McKenna of it all very interesting, I mean that. It's not loaded with some sort of, I actually think this or that. I'm fascinated by this kid and this test case and all the circumstances around it and what this means moving forward. How will this affect other kids down the road who watched Gavin McKenna play a couple of years of junior and was like far and away going to be the first overall pick until he went to college, and it all went off the rails. Does some of them decide not to go? There are so many different elements of the story that I find really interesting. Michael Misa, I would have expected more. It's always hard. We have this conversation all the time about guys coming back from the NHL and how hard that can be. He was coming off an injury as well. But like a lot of people were saying, this line with Misa and Porter Martone and Tej again got it going late. Well, they helped blow up Slovakia in the quarters. But beyond that, the Hage line was better. And that shouldn't have been the case with Porter Martone, Tej Ginla, and Michael Misa. For me, they were not Canada's top line. So that's a disappointment. Carter George, I don't know. Goalies are voodoo. Last year, he was the only reason Canada was even competitive. This year, he wasn't very good. Was it a worse team in front of him? Sure. I thought Dale Hunter's team was fairly disorganized through most of the tournament. So that could have been part of it. Ivan Kovac comes in for the quarters and the semis. I'm on record on the show saying I thought that was the right decision. Didn't work out. I'm not sure I'd blame Ivan Kovac. I guess he tweaked something late in the semi. Carter George goes in the bronze medal game. Gets scored on his first shot again, which had happened the last time you played Finland. That looked like it was going to be another scary afternoon, but Canada pulls it out 6-3. Goaltending is voodoo. I don't know what to say about that. But it's just interesting, man. When you sit back and you look at everything that happened here, you just got by the Czechs in the first game. You just got by Latvia in the second game. You laid a beating on Denmark. Great. And the Finland game on New Year's Eve was sloppy as hell. You blow away Slovakia in the quarters. You lose to the Czechs in the semis, and it's a 6-3 knife fight again with the Finns in the bronze medal game. I don't know whether this team was any good or not. I don't know if this team was poorly coached. I didn't like the attitude of the team, I can tell you that. And I think attitude often reflects leadership. And people who follow junior hockey a lot closer than me were not shy on Sunday evening talking about, yeah, this is what Dale Hunter teams do. From the very beginning of the tournament. I don't think it's the end of the world, but Canada doing what they did in the warm-ups of that first game, skating across center, the ass tap after that game, the penalties and the shit attitude at the end of the semifinal, couple too many meltdowns for me, you guys screaming at the officials and just unlikable stuff. It might be a reach to, I don't know, to be able to say this group of guys that's only been playing for Dale Hunter for a couple of weeks adopted his full attitude, but I think they knew what was expected out of them from him. But I was surprised that they were as disorganized as they were throughout the tournament, because he is legitimately a good coach. That's why the Knights have so much success. I didn't blame Hockey Canada for going back to him this time after a couple disappointing outings. Happened several years ago with Brent Sutter. Didn't work then either. But if you remember, he had a run with the Canadian junior team where they were unstoppable. He stepped away for a while. The program struggled for a while. He came back. You know, we all have our safety blankets. But I thought it was pretty embarrassing the way that semifinal finished. Like I said, with guys yelling at the referee and taking penalties and just, they're teenagers. I'm not trying to be too hard on them, but you got beat. It wasn't bad officiating. It wasn't you being screwed over by the referees. You got beat. And I thought it was just sort of an extension of some not super laudable behavior at different times throughout the tournament. But they're kids. You're not going to, I didn't go looking for anybody's Facebook account, or none of these kids are on Facebook. They're TikToks. You just kind of roll your eyes and go, really, this is how we're going to go out? But the Czechs become only the second team in the history of the World Junior Hockey Championship, at least since Canada began the program of excellence in the early 80s, where you stopped just sending the Memorial Cup champ or one of your top club teams to this thing and started putting together actual national teams, best players from across Canada. The Czechs are now only the second team to eliminate Canada for 3 straight years, other than the Russians, who have not been welcome recently. So they're legit. And I think the last thing I'll say on this is I don't want to have this same silly conversation after the tournament anymore, where we go, I know everybody's disappointed, but it's good for the tournament. We get it. We don't have to say this anymore. It's so condescending to say that to these other countries. They have caught up. Even dating, but so this will be the 3rd straight year that Canada, hasn't won the thing, hasn't played in a gold medal game. Go back to Halifax, the last time they did play in a gold medal game. Overtime. In the quarterfinals, just to get by Slovakia. Overtime. In the gold medal game. To beat the Czechs. This is not the walkover anymore. This is not the 10-2 games anymore. The world has caught up. And when that happens, we don't have to still try and soothe our own bruised little egos with, well, it sucks for us, but it's good for the tournament. Who gives a shit? The Americans won it 2 in a row. The Finns have won it lately. I don't know yet, but we're about to see the Swedes or the Czechs win it here on Monday night. I promise you, at the Olympics next month, if Canada loses to somebody in the gold medal game, there won't be anybody on Twitter, none of the sports reporters who like to look down there, almost always working for Rogers, who want to dump on the thing because it's not their property, going, well, it's good for the Olympics that Canada didn't win. Nobody will say that. Oh, it was good for hockey that Canada didn't win. None of them. But everybody gets weird about this tournament. And look, if you like it, great. If you don't, great. But everybody shows up at the end when Canada doesn't do well with their weird little narratives and why we are all stupid for caring and watching this thing. And when Canada wins, they don't say a word. But when they lose, it's a high and mighty look down their nose at you kind of thing. Canada's playing the Czech Republic. Canada's playing Czechia to start the Olympic Games. I have no idea whether this rivalry that has been going on for 3 years at the World Juniors will carry over. I tend to doubt it, but if that game goes poorly, or if Canada loses in a quarter or a semi or a final over at the Olympics, we will not have this weird moment at the end of the tournament where we go, well, I'm disappointed, but it's good for the Olympics. As if the Olympics somehow needs further elevating, further credence or kudos. This tournament is not the Olympics, but it does not still need us to say, well, our loss, I will fall on my sword. Thank goodness our loss allowed the Czechs or the Swedes to have a great moment and a new winner of the tournament. They don't need our help for them to win anymore. They don't need any kind of condescending, silly little... It's almost like this weird, we have stepped aside for you. You didn't. You got beat by a team that played better. And it's for the 3rd straight year. The tournament is fine. If Canada wins 3 in a row from here on out, the tournament will be fine. If Canada continues to lose out early, the tournament will be fine. So enough with the, well, at least some good can come of this. If you don't care about the tournament, then just keep your mouth shut about the tournament when it doesn't go well. If you do care about the tournament, Have at it. Voice your opinion. I think this was a problem. I didn't like the coaches they chose. I think they selected too many of this type of player or that type of player. That's fine. Stay out of the kids' replies and have the debate. But we do some weird shit when we lose this tournament. And the conversation gets so odd. Probably my most controversial or hot take from after that semi was that I was totally fine with the way this tournament played out in terms of the way Canada played. Like, I wasn't losing my mind over it. Obviously, I wish they would have blown the Czechs away at some point or played better in some games and won. So when I say I'm fine with how they played, I'd hoped they'd played better, but I didn't feel disgraced. I didn't feel like this Canada team is embarrassing. You lost. Even that Latvia game that you won, they were full value for hanging tight. Making you play that full game out. So had Canada just lost to the Czechs in the semi in a tough game, which this turned out to be, gave up the game-winning goal with whatever it was, a minute and a half left after battling back, that's a tough way to go out. And had it ended there, I go, well, that sucks, but good job, boys. We'll get them next year. It was all the bullshit afterwards. I said I was proud of this team right up until the little temper tantrums at the end. And I get some fucking hooplehead in my replies who I've never fucking heard of going, this coming from a guy who probably would have lost it if they'd have gone down without a fight. And I replied and just said, go find any of my tweets anywhere that suggests that's the type of guy I am. That's the way I want my teams to act in those moments. We lost, let's beat the shit out of somebody. Let's cry to the refs. Go cite the case and come back and bring it to me, or sit this one out. Never heard any word back. That's the way this always goes. But that's just one asshole pissed at the world in that moment, and now I'm going to jump in the replies of people I don't even know to presume that they would feel the way I would feel, I guess. I'm projecting that onto people. We are so weird when we lose this tournament. These are grown-ass adults charging at other grown-ass adults going, if we hadn't had the little temper tantrum, you'd be pissed at them for being soft. You have no idea how I would view that. We're so weird about this tournament. And this year was much like it's been for me for the last several years. I used to get so excited leading up to this tournament, and I would be all in on every game, and win or lose, and to be fair, we did win more often than not. I would walk away from that going, that was my favorite sporting event of the year. Decided by January 5th. Takes the pressure off the rest of the year having to keep track. And now, I don't get as excited. Maybe that's just being old and skeptical. But when the tournament starts, I do still watch it, and I watch a lot of it. I watch more of it this year than in a lot of years. There were some really good games, especially over in the other pool. The Swiss and the Slovaks were holding it tight with the Swedes and the Americans. It was a good tournament. And then we lost, and that was a disappointment. But man, if I thought the teenagers were, at least with them, they got a bit of an excuse. You're young, you're emotional, you're stupid. We were all there. It just happens to be on national television. It's the grown-ass adults who just melt down after this thing. But we do need to have a conversation because the rest of the world is catching up. But I think it's reasonable to say, are we choosing these teams properly? I thought the installation of a full-time general manager for the program of excellence was a step in the right direction. But are we doing everything we can to extend our time at the top, to slow down how fast the rest of the world is closing the gap? The Americans are here. That ship has sailed. But should we be knifing it out with the Czechs every year? Well, they're playing in a gold medal game, and we're not. And for the last 3 years, they have finished ahead of us. And even the last time we finished ahead of them in that gold medal game in Halifax, it took overtime to do it. So I don't think we got to burn the system down. I don't think we got to fire everybody. But it is possible to go, okay, full credit to the Czechs for what they just did. Do we need to look inside a little bit and go, is there anything different we should be doing? That's only responsible. That's what leadership should do. And if you finish that process, that internal investigation, and say, I stand by that roster. I stand by that coaching staff. We just got beat. That's a reasonable conclusion to come to. But it would be irresponsible after 3 straight disappointing exits from this tournament to not at least take a look at it and say, I wonder if we should do something else. I wonder if there's something we're missing in selection, in systems, in attitude. We got to figure something else out. It's worth a look. That's all. Anyway, it sucked. That was a tough way for the tournament to finish. And it did have that feel to it at the end when Canada scored to tie it up late, of one of those miracle comeback. And it's hard to get yourself as excited, or at least it used to be. You know, a miracle comeback against the Russians or a miracle comeback against the Americans, win it in overtime, goes down as one of those instant classics. It would be hard to feel that way about the Czechs because we've owned them for so long, but not really. If they've beaten us the last 2 years in a row, it would have had that feel. We have come back and conquered the team that has owned us for a couple of years. And it had that feeling until it didn't. Anyway, just some final thoughts there on the way the World Juniors wrapped up. Truth be told, I'm probably, and again, you'll already know how this played out by the time you hear the show, I'm probably rooting for the Swedes. As a hockey power, it is wild how few of these tournaments they've won. I think it's one in the last 42 years or 44 years or whatever it is. They deserve better than that. And my spiteful little heart would have a hard time cheering for the Czechs right now anyway. So, go Sweden. Wrap it up here. We'll be back later in the week, hopefully with a guest. But we'll see how this all shakes loose. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed the tournament for what it was. Hope you enjoyed or tolerated my final thoughts on it. We'll talk to you in a couple of days.
Yo, yeah, warriors are drinking it down. Raise your voices and stare at this town. We're the champions of craft beer sport. Tall can